Did everybody have a chance to read the essay?
A couple of times.
A couple of times.
Did a little extra research.
One thing he mentioned was kinesin.
Mm-hmm.
I wish that there was more information about like what kinesin looks like and like how its functionality works. But if you've ever seen an animation of what kinesin looks like and how it works, it is pretty remarkable. Like it literally marches. Like
Yes.
he says in the essay, it marches, and it's like, yeah, the purpose of this high-speed marching is revealed in the other half of the heavy chain molecule. Like, I feel like that's slightly understated because it literally walks on feet. It's like, what? That is insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, this video is perfect. I was going to suggest this one as well, the UC San Francisco. I wanted to text it to you. I was like, I don't know if there's going to be time.
Yeah, it's not long. It's 3 minutes.
Right, it's only like 3 minutes, and it's the dude who was on the team that discovered kinesin. Kinesin is crazy, man. And he says in this video that, like, proportionally speaking, the speed at which kinesin moves is proportional to how a car moves on the highway, like relative to its size, which is just that's amazing. To me, anyways.
Is it 80 miles an hour?
Well, relative to its size. I mean, yeah, something like that. I mean, just think about it. Like, it's a molecule relative to the size of your body. So, like, proportionally speaking, yeah, it's like miles.
Yeah, so they first talked about, the different, the different quote unquote barcode reader to break things down, and then well, what if we point it at a person and break down and see what they're made of? And it's like, wow, you can go a lot more deeper than they even explain. And so I wanted to write this down because just to kind of put it out there to see, like, I mean, you got quarks and electrons make protons, neutrons, or atoms. Combined in different configurations make elements. Those combined in different configurations make amino acids. Those combined in different configurations make proteins. Oh, what did it put?
Forgot strings.
Forgot what?
Strings.
There's mirrored images of amino acids.
Oh yeah, the chiral.
Yeah.
CHIRL.
CHRY.
So basically, there's left-hand and right-hand versions of it. For life, for these to work, you have to have all, or layman's term, left-hand versions of them. Otherwise, it won't work. So not only do you need specific combinations of amino acids, you also need certain versions of the amino acids.
Right.
So those create proteins, and the different combination of proteins make enzymes. And each layer is very specific. And then you go back to the top, and then you have protons and neutrons, elements that make, in different combinations, make your nitrogenous bases, your sugar molecules, and your phosphate groups. And those in different combinations make your nucleotides. And those in different combinations make your DNA. And then your DNA is the structures for making your protein.
Well, one thing you left out there, though, is the physical laws that
Yes.
underlie all of
Yes.
that,
That's
and the basis
very
for all of
important,
that,
yes.
too.
Because they'll try and combine these and do these tests and stuff in labs nowadays, but they're in controlled environments. You gotta think of when this is happening at the beginning of time, it's not clean and contained in the perfect quantities and amounts and tools.
And even one thing, an analogy that just I thought of was interesting is like, and what they have produced in the lab is like the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel versus what a toddler does on the wall with the contents of his diaper.
That's good.
I mean, it's so far. I mean, making a few amino acids and combining them is absolutely nothing compared to the complexity of the cell. It doesn't
Just
even
a
begin to
single cell.
compare.
Yeah, just a single
Yeah,
cell,
yeah,
let alone
yeah.
the eyeball.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then that can go even further. Enzymes, and then you go down to the cell, and then I during a study this week, I found a quote, and I should have wrote it down. The two gentlemen that found DNA, when they found it, they said, "Oh, see, God doesn't exist." I was like, well, break it down. It's so, right, this goes to that specified complexity. It's so complex, it's so organized. There's no way it can exist without something that created.
Right. Well, and I think the point that we're getting at with all of this is that we've been throwing around this word teleology a lot, and it comes from the Greek for purpose, telos. And what we're observing in this complexity is not just that it's complex, but that there is intrinsic purpose behind the complexity. Like, it's not just complex. I mean, a snowstorm is complex, but there's not really a whole lot of purpose there. It's just, a whole lot of flakes, flying in the air. But rather, like, this complexity is for a specific purpose. It has that telos. And so the reason I wanted to show this video from Cold Case Christianity, actually I think it's God's Crime Scene, is that what's screaming from this essay, but he doesn't really directly address, is the information inherent in the complexity. The information isn't, so there's 5 levels of information, and that's what the video talks about. And the type of information that we're observing in this complexity is the highest level of information, namely the kind that can only come from an intelligence, a mind. It's not just like, like a snowstorm would be the lowest level of information, namely statistics. The only information, present in a snowstorm would be like the position and the size of the snowflakes. But there isn't really any kind of like purpose or intention behind it. It's just, it's happening, like the snowflakes in a blizzard are in a specific place at a specific time of a specific size, but that doesn't really have any kind of like influence over the outcome, if you know what I mean. So
It's a consequence of factors.
Right, it's just statistics. It's the lowest level of information. It's just information for the sake of information. There isn't really a message behind it. And what we observe with kinesin is that there is a message, there is a point, there's a purpose, there's an intent, a design, which can only come from intelligence. Should we start with the kinesin video because it's shorter? Okay.
Yeah, I'll just stay in order.
Let's make sure we can see the TV. And I'll put a link to this video up here.
There's constant motion inside of your cells. There's new construction, demolition, and most importantly, transporting goods from one place in the cell to another. Cells transport goods along cellular roadways. To transport cargo along these roads, the cells use motor proteins. Kinesin is one of these motor proteins. If you didn't have kinesin and other motor proteins, you simply wouldn't be alive. All the cells in your body depend upon these tiny motor proteins to organize and power themselves, to divide and multiply, and to communicate with other cells. Let's start with how you began, as a fertilized egg. That egg has to divide into many more cells. All of those divisions require kinesin and many other motor proteins. Development, forming tissues and different parts of your body, requires molecular motion and motor proteins. Every cell of your body requires them for survival. What we know now is that kinesin effectively has 2 legs. And these legs are able to coordinate a walking motion along a track. That track is called a microtubule, and the kinesin undergoes this beautiful choreographed walking action. While the kinesin is walking along this track, at the other end of the kinesin, it gets hooked up to a cargo. These motor proteins move quickly and efficiently. Relative to their size, they move as fast as a car on a freeway. But they're 4 times more efficient than your car in converting chemical energy into motion. We discovered kinesin in 1984. I was 25 years old at the time and a graduate student. I was interested in the transportation system inside of nerve cells. And what makes nerve cells so interesting is that they're extraordinarily long cells. For example, the part of your nerve cell that has the nucleus, where the DNA is located in your spinal cord. But it can extend a very long tube all the way, for example, to your foot. All of the building blocks for that nerve cell are made in your spinal cord, and all those building blocks have to be shipped to the very end of that nerve cell a meter away. There had to be some kind of transport system that was moving these building blocks inside the nerve cell, and I wanted to know how that transportation system worked. After we got this transport to work in this test tube, the hunt was on then to find the key molecule that was responsible for that movement. And we eventually found it, and it turned out to be something completely new that no one had ever discovered before. Watching these movements under the microscope, it was fascinating then to figure out, how does this motor actually work? How does something that's a millionth of an inch in size generate that motion? My lab at UCSF spent about 10 to 20 years trying to figure out the answer to that question. We know about kinesin now, we know a lot about how it moves, but there's still so many fundamental questions that we don't know about how all this motility is regulated, how all of these cargoes know how to go to the right places. There are always new questions that one wants to know the answers to.
It's pretty amazing that it literally walks like footsteps left to right.
Yeah, it's interesting. In my research, I also found another motor protein called dynein, or dynein. I'm not sure exactly how you pronounce it, but it's vastly larger than kinesin. Kinesin's about 1,000 amino acids, and this other one's probably twice that big or so. But it's interesting. Kinesin works to the positive end of the microtubule. This dynein walks the opposite direction. So kinesin without the other one is useless.
It's a one-way road.
It's a one-way street. It all gets clogged up. But this other one, and you think about the complexity of that, that's 20 amino acids to the 1,000th power is the search space for this. You know?
That one alone, not to mention things that make it up.
Yeah.
And the things it creates.
Yeah.
It's like,
And so that kinesin without the microtubule, without the dynein, ceases to be of any use, any function. So, you know, you go back to the argument of the mousetrap, was it? Can't even think of the term right now. But, you know, the minimal requirement for a cell is just so stratospherically insane that, I mean, the faith of an evolutionist, a true evolutionist, is just mind-boggling.
yes. I wonder if they play the lotto.
I don't think most of them really think about it. I think they just
Denial.
Yeah, well, either denial or they don't think about it. Like, they just don't care enough to consider the concepts of probability.
Yeah, maybe so focused on just what they do in their area.
I think they're more focused on understanding rather than like knowing and discovering the etiology behind it, the cause of it. So the thing that I'm trying to point to with all of this is not only is it mind-blowingly complex, but the real crux of it, the evidence for God, in my opinion, isn't so much the complexity, as mind-blowing as the complexity is, but it's the intrinsic information that can only come from an intelligent source. The complexity of it is, like, what are the odds that this would just happen to come about? Yes, that's totally valid, and that's 100% true. But I think beneath that layer is staring you in the face a real piece of information that is of such intelligence that it doesn't just come about by chance. It's screaming an author, like you wouldn't pick up a book and be like, wow, what are the odds that all these letters would just, come together? Like there is nuance. It's not just the letters themselves. There's story, there's narrative, there's depth, there's characters, there's nuance.
There's ink and a printer and
well, right. And so that's what this video is about, is the 5 levels of information that Werner Gitt developed. Well, I guess he didn't really develop, he observed. And
codified.
And what we're seeing is the highest level of information. It's not just letters and ink and shapes. There is that depth of information that can only come from an intelligent source.
And I mean, that, to me, that's included in what I say about the complexity, because the complexity points out to the obviousness of that need.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's inherent.
Yeah, inherent. So
right.
Yeah, I like how he mentions in here, like, that's inherent, what you guys are saying, but they choose not to adhere to that because they're
right at the very end. It's like what seems therefore to be likely outcome of molecular biology's fantastic revolution is a growing awareness that living things, including us, are best explained as objects of intelligent nanoengineering. This awareness will no doubt follow the normal course that new ideas follow. First will be ignored, then will be ridiculed, then will be grudgingly tolerated, and finally it'll be said, "Wow, we knew that all along."
Yeah.
So, let's take a look at this.
Yeah.
So these are the 5 levels of information.
Imagine you probably have a dog. I have a dog. I have a great dog, by the way. It's a Welsh Pembroke Corgi named Bailey. I mean, Corgis are great dogs. That's why the Queen has, 10 of these dogs, and it's awesome. But I will tell you that she may not be the smartest dog in the world. If I gave her a typewriter and asked her to bang out a sentence, her first effort looks like what you're seeing here. Is that information? I mean, it's a sequence of letters that are all jumbled around. I mean, is that information? Well, in a sense, it is information. A very low level of information. It's a sequence of letters that's complex. The doctor could type that same sentence twice. It's pretty complex, but it's not specific. There's no specificity. I see no words. This is a level of information that is called statistics by an engineer named Werner Gitt, who has done some work on the levels of information. It's the lowest level of information, just like small repeating patterns, even more complex repeating patterns. This is all information, but it's the lowest level of information. Yes, you could get this kind of information from inside the room of the natural universe with just space, time, matter, physics, and chemistry. Granted, but this is not what DNA is. Let's go another level. What if Bailey, my dog, could get on that typewriter and she could actually type out words like you're seeing now, but they're not words in any particular sentence order. I still know what she's trying to tell me, but hey, at least she knows this. She can code for certain words that I can then understand, recognize, and decode. This is a whole nother level of meaning, a whole other level of information. It's described as cosyntax. Now, this is level 2 information. And there's actually no way to get this level of information from inside the room of the natural universe. You need a mind that can code and understands the formation of words, even understands how these will be read by the receiver. We are now one level outside of what the natural universe can do for you. And we are still not at DNA. This is another level of information, but we're not close to DNA yet. What if Bailey could type out words and actually put them in a sentence? Grandpa is eating. You see, the sentences now has meaning. I understand what Bailey's trying to tell me. She is trying to tell me that Grandpa is eating. This is another level of information. This is called semantics. But we are still not at what DNA is. And we're now 2 levels outside the room of the natural universe in terms of what space, time, matter, physics, and chemistry can deliver. Well, what if Bailey could actually not just type out a sentence, but she can make a request with her sentence? Think about that. Oh my gosh. Well, how would she do that? Here's a sentence, for example. It's clear she wants Grandpa to feed her. Okay. This level of information in which the sender is actually making a request, well, this is a whole nother level of information. We're now 3 levels outside of what the room can do, and this level is called pragmatics. It's very useful and very practical. But what if Bailey's even sharper than this? She's asking Grandpa to feed her not because she wants to get fed. She's asking Grandpa to feed her because she knows that after every meal, Grandpa takes her for a walk. If the goal Bailey has is to get something that happens after the request that she knows is coming, this is called apopetics. It's the highest level of information, and it turns out 4 levels now outside what the natural universe can deliver. We are finally at the level that we see in DNA. How in the world are we going to explain this? Remember, low level information like Bailey's first sentence you see here is no way to tell what it means. And I can even take a character out and it makes no difference in terms of meaning. But go to the highest level of information. Do you see her sentence here? Let's eat, Grandpa. Well, if we take out the comma, the same comma we took out in the first sentence, do you see how the entire meaning of the sentence changes? This is no longer Bailey asking to be fed. This is Bailey who wants to eat Grandpa. Do you see the difference? This is how we know it's the highest level of information. Well, think about this. You and I, we have a DNA code that describes everything about us. And there are now genetic therapies in which all they try to do is change the information in the DNA because subtle changes to the nucleotide sequence produces physical changes in meaning, in structure, in how we are as humans. This tells us that DNA is at the highest level of information, far more than statistics. We are looking at the level that has now been called apopetics. And the reason why that's so powerful is because we've got to try to explain how we've got that kind of information in our universe. Can we stay inside the universe to explain that? Now, there are a couple of ways that people have tried to explain it. They all fail. They can't explain really how we get this level of complexity and specificity in DNA. They can't explain where this might emerge. They can't explain when this might emerge. Now, there is another explanation for DNA. It's not going to be chance, which it isn't, and it's not going to be physical law, which they have to demonstrate to us that physics can somehow produce information, and they haven't. There's another option, and that is that it truly is information. Information that comes from a mind. Now here's what I'm seeing. In all those questions we started with, the what, when, why, where, who questions, the one question that science refuses to ask is the who. They're willing to ask the what, when, why, how, where, no problem. But what if all the evidence we have points to a who and not a what? Are they willing to ask the who question? Well, no, they're not. Well, why not? We don't do science that way, Jim. Really? Well, why don't you ask who questions? Because there are no who's in the natural universe us to ask. It's a what. It's going to be a what. Well, wait a minute. What if all the best evidence you had points to a who? Are you willing to entertain the possibility of a who? And here we have something in the universe, information, which is best explained by a who, an intelligent mind that is the source of the information in the DNA. Once again, we have to jump outside the room of the natural universe to explain what we see in the room of the natural universe. An all-powerful, timeless, spaceless, non-material, uncaused, first cause that is a fine-tuner, creating a universe that has purpose and meaning and that is designed to support life. But not only that, he is communicating to us through the DNA in order to originate life in this universe. He's set the table and now he's delivered the goods. And we are outside the room for our explanation.
So hopefully that drives home the idea that not only is this overwhelmingly complex, but the complexity itself implies the depth of the information inherent in what we're seeing.
I read a piece, and I don't remember all the stuff about it. It was quite complex. I need to study it more, but it was talking about Shannon information and another type of information that combined for specificity, the term they use. A lot of the creationists talk about basically the specificity and complexity combined in this operation, and it was interesting just being able to more clearly define not only the complexity. I mean, he used the example of a bunch of chords stuffed in a box. It's very complex, very hard to describe, but there's no purpose, no inherent,
Right. There's no telos.
Yeah, and you just got deeper into kind of defining some of the terms and stuff, and it was very interesting. And you know, it's funny. I've kind of gone away from the DNA and looking more at the proteins in terms of complexity. I mean, it's all defined by the DNA, but there's so much more. I mean,
It definitely seems easier to identify purpose in proteins because proteins all have different functions, whereas DNA seems more like the syntax, the language of the proteins.
yeah.
Yeah, that's very good. That's I wanted to touch on next is DNA essentially is just information.
Yeah, it's the letters.
If you don't do anything with it, if it doesn't have value or purpose because it's not being used or you can't understand it, what good is it?
Yeah, and like you said, you know, at the lowest level, statistics, you take out one letter and it's like, well, that doesn't really make any difference. It's no less confusing or no more confusing. It doesn't make any difference. Whereas with apopetics, just taking out one comma completely changes the meaning of the sentence from, you know, let's eat grandpa to let's eat grandpa.
Yeah.
Like that one, you know, little tiny change has such an impact on the meaning that, you know, like it's not just, you know, changing, you know, one letter of the DNA has no impact. Like it has a huge impact.
Yeah. I think that points to the specificity. You know, it's not just, again, not just random, but intent and purpose involved in that is revealed by that.
The purpose
The
is a
telos.
good one. Yeah, it can exist, and if it's not doing anything, if it's not replicating or doing anything, it's just like a book on a shelf. But it's not, and it is creating these proteins and these other parts of the body, which you can get all kinds of complex. There's the multiple different life systems in a body that have to develop at the same time in a specific or certain ones in a specific order, while others at the same time. And if anything's different, it won't work. I mean, they build upon each other, and some are dependent on each other, and all of that's in there. And it's incredibly amazing.
One thing that I think it was in that postscript that he talked about was how the the more complex organisms don't have that much more information than the
20,000 genes.
Yeah. And I thought about this, and something that he didn't elaborate on, but made sense to me, is it points out the insane complexity of even the smallest organism, and that the larger organisms are basically rearranging those basic units. And so it doesn't take a lot of information to rearrange the basic units, but to organize and produce the basic units is just inconceivable.
Yeah. The one thing I also didn't put on here and is not only is there information in the DNA, there's also information in the cell wall. I call it hereditary information that they're learning about now. And it's fantastic.
Yeah, there's the DNA, there's the electrical coding in the cell walls, and then another thing that I've read about recently is the sugar code, and just how it's the simple sugar that's used in most life forms can be arranged in, it's like a set of 6 of these can be arranged in like 40,000 different configurations. The numbers may be way off, but it was just like, what? And those all code for different things within the cell. And even beyond that, you know, we talked about the kinesin and the microtubules, but how is their destination specified?
Yeah, that's good.
How is the request for the materials they're moving made, and what processes that?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. There's
Yeah.
more to it that we haven't really looked at.
We haven't even got close
Yeah,
to that portion of it.
Right.
that's good. Yeah.
And that's not physical, that's metaphysical.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
information itself isn't physical, it's metaphysical.
Yeah.
It's it's intrinsic to the
Well, it's not even,
material.
not even information, but it's decision making.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's so funny, like sometimes I'll look at things like viruses and be like, does it have a mind? How does it know what to do? It's just like, oh man.
And all of
It's
that is
amazing.
pre-packaged.
Yeah.
The idea that we evolved, and this is just,
By chance.
man, no
Yeah.
way.
And this got to change the subject, but it's just comical to me and just amazing is I saw this video where they had rescued this little beaver before it had any exposure to the parents or whatever. I don't know whether it was mother was hit by a car or whatever, you know. Anyway, this little tiny thing that they've raised in a little veterinary hospital or whatever, and it made dams in the doorway. It took
It never learned
Took
how
this
to do
hat
it, it just knew how to
and
do it.
stuffed that. It took this long toy and set it in the doorway.
Yes.
And it's like
It never learned how to do
Yes,
it.
No.
It just knew
exactly,
how to
yes.
do it.
that's in the DNA. It's in the cells of that animal, and it's like even behaviors and thoughts and
Totally non-physical
ideas,
things.
yeah, are inherent in that structure.
Yes. I saw another one recently. It was pretty cool. I think it's baby rats. They have to have their mother. If they get separated, they'll die. Like they'll try and feed them. They can have all the stuff, but if they don't have the presence of either another mama rat or its mom, that just being that closeness and that caring, they'll die. And it's like, that's crazy.
Let's prove that with human infants too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
There was another video that I'd seen, and it's short, so I'll just play it. But it's this guy talking about the 4 assumptions, or 4 things that that evolution's kind of 4 assumptions that are unprovable. They've never been observed.
Observed. Number one, that life comes from non-life. We have not one single example of life coming from non-life. Number two, that all the life forms that we have today came from single cell life forms. Many people do not know that while we do have single cell life forms that we call bacteria, we have no 2-cell life forms, we don't have 3-cell life forms, we don't have 4-cell life forms, we don't even have 5-cell life forms. That is, we go from single cell bacteria to complex life forms. So there's no evidence that all life comes from single cell life forms. The third postulate of evolution is that time and chance drive evolution forward, of course, and time works against evolution. The chance of one simple 100-unit protein coming together by accident is a very big number. Time and chance make evolution absolutely impossible. The fourth postulate that evolution is based on is that what we see today, minor genetic variation, in species is evidence of macroevolution. So because cats are different colors, dogs are different sizes, that means that fish turned into cows. And of course, we know that that's not true because Mendel proved that all the genes that exist today, you can shuffle them around, but there are no new genes that were created. Yep.
Yeah. Pretty basic.
Yeah, that last part you said there, we've scientists, not we, because I'm not a scientist speaking for them, but scientists and molecular biologists, and all of them have never witnessed new information being created. They talk about mutation all the time, but mutation is taking existing information and actually it's taking information out. All mutations are less information. So
Natural selection is the removal of information from the genome.
Yep.
Yeah. Another thing that, talking about the chance and stuff is, all evolutionists that are halfway honest will say that there are more malignant or damaging mutations than there are positive ones, okay, which is obviously true. Okay, so if you extend that over time, that means that the genome is going to be destroyed over time.
Yeah.
So the more time you have, the more time you have for destruction. And any improvement is going to be overwhelmed by the negative mutations. So, and the whole house of cards just falls apart when you look at it from a statistical point of view.
And there's now a different belief. It used to be back when Darwin came out with his original book and thesis, but that we had one universal tree of common descent. That is now not the case. Most people now believe there's multiple trees because they're trying to explain it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, there must be multiple trees because we see the explosion of life in these different periods just all at the same time.
Which requires abiogenesis in multiple different locations and time frames, which the first one was impossible.
Yeah.
Multiple ones are even worse.
Yeah. And so to think that now it's mutations, and as time goes on, we're losing information. So if we go back to Adam and Eve, how much more information do they have? They could easily explain why they lived 900 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
They had extra systems or extra stuff we just don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd like for you to elaborate on what you said about evolution is not looking at that, because for me, it's 1,000 or a 10,000 foot view of, okay, we have this, okay, that means this, okay, that's our foundation. How can we ignore that? It doesn't make sense to me. So.
I think it would be similar to like how we as Christians don't really focus too much on Islam. We don't really study the Quran. We don't study some Christians do, but for the most part, Christians stick to the Bible and Christian theology, and just don't really bother to think about other perspectives because we're so confident in our own worldview. And so it's similar in the sense that it's kind of a form of denial, I suppose, that I don't think evolutionists really care to look at that, because some probably recognize that it's problematic, but just for the convenience of their own study, they just don't care, because it would be like spinning their wheels in the mud. It's like, why would I waste my time, dwelling on the problems of the thing that I believe in? I'd rather, study and understand, the things that aren't so problematic. And maybe that's a bad analogy, but that's all I meant by it.
It's an automatic message.
mattresses here.
I'm gonna have to go.
All right. Well,
That's good timing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
You're
it's,
gonna leave
that's
it
still
entirely
that's
up
still
to Hannah
just
to
that's still
decide what
just
we're doing next week.
that still just boggles my mind though.
Well, and I think it's.
I mean, like, as your, for your example, from a Christian perspective, I don't believe it because there's nothing else out there. I believe it because it works. It's proven.
I guess what I was getting at is I've heard what's his name, Harris. Sam Harris. I've heard Sam Harris in a debate say, how many nights of sleep have you as a Christian lost over the fact that if Islam is true, you're going to hell? How many nights of sleep have you lost? None, because we're not bothered by that. We don't think about whether or not Islam is true because we're so confident that Christianity is true. So I think the same is the case for.
But that's based on evidence.
Oh, sure. I'm not saying that they're equally true or false.
Right.
That's not what I'm saying.
I realize that, but I'm saying there's a reason I don't dwell on that.
But they don't.
But they have that. Yeah.
They don't.
Well,
choose
we
to
looked at
look
all
the evidence.
most options and then.
Yeah.
They're just
Really,
looking at
all I
one.
was getting at is I think that's why evolutionists just live in ignorance about that gap, because they're one, they're so confident, and two, they just don't care to bother with that
I think
problem.
it's complex, and of course I think there's probably some that do, but the ones that don't, we can only postulate. I think that possibly, I'm going to take a guess and say it's the materialistic naturalism.
Yeah, that too.
And there's that. Well, God doesn't exist, and I don't exist. Maybe they didn't go to church and they don't believe in God, and there's no way.
Because I just.
You would think they would
I
be
mean,
able to
it's
see
like-
the evidence.
It's like the foundation of their entire argument is
Right.
based on this assumption. You'd think they would challenge the assumption,
Right? Yeah.
but apparently not.
I mean, we see it. We're not as smart as some of them. So.
And you said something earlier. I'm not a scientist. Yes, you are. What's a scientist?
Sure. Yeah.
Someone that observes and makes
Yeah.
rational decision based on that evidence. You're a scientist.
Sure. Yeah. See you next week. Actually, see you tomorrow. Do we have that men's group meeting tomorrow? Is that,
Yeah,
I
I forgot
think.
about that, yeah.
He hasn't mentioned anything, but I think that's what he said.
Okay.
Where are we at on time? 37. Cool. All right, Hannah. Well, you gotta pick the next one.
No pressure. It's completely okay to choose one that we've already done.
Mhm.
That's totally fine.
Or something off topic.
I'm here to learn. I got not much to contribute.
It's all right. Is there anything that sounds exciting or piques your interest? We've done 6 in science, 6 in the question of Jesus, 5 in the Bible, and 3 in philosophy.
Science, eugenics, and bioethics.
I'm surprised that there's 2 topics that aren't in this book. One, fine tuning. I feel like there really needs to be a fine
Yeah,
tuning.
it does.
And maybe it's kind of buried under one of these, like creator and system or God's
Yeah.
essential role in the universe. That sounds like it might be fine tuning. The other one is the applicability of mathematics. I'm surprised there's no essay on that.
Mm-hmm.
The credibility of Jesus' miracles.
Sure, the Craig Blomberg.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
Alright.
Well, let's do that one. Credibility of Jesus' Miracles by Craig Blomberg.
Awesome. Yeah, it might just be buried.
And we can do where the resurrection appearance of Jesus is hallucinating. That one.
That one too, or that one
No,
instead?
that one before Easter.
Oh.
Yeah, that would be good timing.
Yeah, but I was looking in other books for things I've read for examples for these, and I'm like looking through the page, the section titles. I'm like, where is it? That must be buried.
Yeah, I'm guessing like if fine tuning is mentioned, it's probably inside one of these essays, but it's like hidden behind the
Oh,
title
did you get the digital version
of the.
of this?
Yeah, no. No, when I type it, I just use OCR.
That's the one thing about digital versions is search.
Yeah. Okay. There we go. All right. Well, shall we close in prayer?
Lord, thank you for allowing us to gather today and learn about nanoengineering and biology and the cell, and just see how complex and amazing and wonderful you've made it, and see your fingerprints. Lord, we can't deny, Lord, that you created it. We pray, Lord, that we continue just to learn about you and how you did things, and about just everything, Lord, and be able to defend our faith and give answers for what we believe in, Lord. Help us throughout the week and help us put you first in everything we do. Yes. Amen.
Amen.